Pretty much everything that I'm going to tell you is that the film and TV industry, everything you thought you knew, is totally wrong.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Film Goals podcast. Today I'm with the one and only Gene Sugano.
Hello.
Gene is a commercial producer. He's been in video production for over 20 years.
31 years to be
Oh,
exact.
shit. Well, I said over 20. So. I wasn't trying to age you.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
What I want to know is what the teaser video is going to be. I was driving over, I'm like, Angel there's a little teaser that grabs people into the show, right? So,
did you think of one?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Because I was thinking this will be good for the teaser because we're not going to make reference to it in the rest of the video.
Okay.
And then you got to cut it out so that when people watch it, they go, wait, what happened to the part that was in the teaser? Like when you watch a movie trailer, right?
Yeah.
And you see something, you're like, oh, and then you look for that in the movie, it's not there because they took it out for timing or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, I was thinking, I wanted to just come up with a ridiculous phrase. And then you put it in the teaser.
Okay.
So here's the teaser. All right. Pretty much everything that I'm going to tell you is that the film and TV industry, everything you thought you knew, is totally wrong. There you go.
And just don't explain what's
yeah,
wrong
don't
with
even
it.
explain nothing. It's just in the teaser. So that's not even going to be in this part.
It's kind of short, but I'll make it work. All right. So Gene has been in the video production industry since Oregon, right? You're originally from Oregon?
In Oregon.
And then moved here. So, what made you want to get into video and, filmmaking?
Well, it's funny because when I first started in, college, I had to choose a major, and I did the morning announcements in high school on my junior and senior year, maybe even just my senior year. I did the morning announcements because I thought, people said, you'd be really good in radio because I like to talk, and I was a ham. And so, and at the time...
A ham?
Yeah, a ham. So a ham for
Hard
you
as a
young
motherfucker?
ones who... What's that?
Hard as a motherfucker?
No. So a ham there are people who really like to get in the limelight, to get in the spotlight, and really try to... It's kind of like a show off in a way, as the class clown, that kind of a thing, always trying to get the attention. So, so I did the morning announcements, and I really enjoyed it. And everyone from that point on said, you'd be good in radio. And I thought, radio. And I had this romantic view of radio, that you're sitting in this dark studio at night. Remember, I don't know, there were some old TV shows, and I can't remember the name of them at the top of my head now. But there were some old TV shows and even DJs depicted in movies where, it's just track lights and it's really dim and they're talking into the microphone and you just even listening to the radio and hearing their voices, it sounded so deep because they had the nice microphones. And I just thought, that's what I want to do. I just want to sit in a dark room where people are hearing me across the country or wherever. And I guess it stems back to my really young childhood when I would listen to the radio and I had a microphone, and they called it Mr. Microphone, and it was my Donnie and Marie microphone that it would transmit to your FM 88 or something like that, or AM 88 or something like that. It would transmit to that signal, but just within the 20 feet or so you're from the radio. And I thought it was broadcasting to the entire country. And so I would just, as a kid, I'd be talking into the thing and I'd have my own talk show. And so then when I got to college, I guess stemming from my young childhood to high school when I did the morning announcements and got into college, and I said, well, I want to get into radio. And so they said, that's going to be communications, mass communications to be exact, and if you want to do a broadcast emphasis, so that means more television and radio stuff as opposed to the newspaper, because I didn't want to write. And so I got into college and did my 4 years there. And the first couple of years I did the radio, and it was a lot of fun. I thought, and I was doing the early morning, like 6 a.m. signing on. Back then, they didn't have 24-hour radio or television even, funny enough. That was 88 to 92. So
did the radio turn off? Which is
yeah, the radios would sign off, yeah. And TV stations, too. TV stations. So even when I got my first job in television in 1992. yeah, I started doing the radio stuff, and yeah, radio would sign off at a certain hour, and then they would turn back on at another hour, and then yeah, there's static. There's nothing. For television stations, it was a color bars and tone. It was just beep.
Yeah.
And if you watch old films, you'll see that, right? And you're like, well, what's that all about? But that's the way it was back in the day. My advisor, he said, well, you can get into video production, and you can run camera for the football games or basketball games and learn how to direct and shoot and things. And when I started doing video production, I was like, oh man, this is really cool, because now I can take those things that I've always done as a kid, like the talk show stuff, and I can make them into videos. But the funny thing was, I didn't do the talk show thing in video. I did that all audio based. And then when I was kind of my senior year in high school, I wanted to be like I wanted to be like David. This is really dating me. I know your viewers are younger than me and you.
This is a nice history lesson for everybody.
Yeah, nice history lesson. I said, when I chiseled on a rock and, made videos that way. No, so, yeah, David Letterman, when he was in his early years, I used to stay up late at night and watch David Letterman before the TV station would sign off. So that's the crazy part. Right after David Letterman, they would play the national anthem, color bars. But David Letterman, I loved just because he was so funny. And so I would record the audio from his show, and then I would play it on one tape player, and that would be my audience reaction, and I would edit it so that I could have the laugh track and everything and the intro, and then I would conduct these interviews, and I kind of forgot about it until a few years ago. My cousin in California, because I would record them and then send them to my cousins as if I was some famous guy in Oregon at 18 years old, and so my cousin actually gave me my cassette back.
Oh wow!
After all of these years, and I listened to it, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's kind of embarrassing, cringy, but it was me interview. I would call up my friend, and he had no idea why I'd call him. I said, hey, welcome to the show, and then I would say, so what brings you here? And he's like, what's going on? And then I would play the laugh track and everything, and he's like, what's happening? So then, yeah, but that led up to the radio and stuff. But when I got into TV and learned how to make edits, it was like, oh wow! And we were learning on VHS. Now, for those of you who don't know the history of video, so of course film was the thing that started it all, and that's where we get 24 frames per second to create the illusion of motion, right? Mm-hmm. And that was the formula that they figured out, because if you watch the old movies, which was like 13 frames per second, everyone kind of walks and moves really fast. Yeah. So then they figured out the 24 frames per second. Well, in video, they figured out, well, it's 29 frames per second or 30 frames per second, and that created this really smooth kind of motion compared to film, I guess. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't recorded on film; it was recorded on a magnetic tape, and then that magnetic tape was read by a little electronic head, if you will, that would turn that information into your motion video and audio.
And television, yeah.
Yeah, and so I learned that, and I was like, oh, okay, wow, and there's, on this little strip of tape, you have the track for the video and the audio, and it's all kind of laid out in that way. And so I learned about all of those things, and
was that in college, or was that when you got your first job?
That was in college.
Oh, okay.
That was in college, and so it was all videotape, and we had a camera, and I used to love making videos, and I guess the thing that set me apart from all my other classmates, the 8, because even my audio production class was 8 people, my video production was like 8 people, and there were different people too. So there were the radio nerds and the TV nerds, and I was both. But so we'd have to do these projects, and I always wanted to incorporate comedy into my stuff. And I learned, so in video, if you're going to edit tape to tape, you have to, and this is what I learned from college, because I was doing it at home with one VHS machine and another VHS machine. I would hit play and then record and pause on the other one. But when you do that, you get this little this kind of line or something that happens in a video, because you have to have what they call a control track, I guess, if that's what the correct term was. I can't remember. It's been a long time. But so in video production class, we learned that you have to take your tape and black your tape. And you hit record and play and just let it record black for the duration of whatever you're going to edit. And then you'd have to do what they called insert edit, which means once you black the tape, it lays down a time code. And everyone's familiar with time code, you know, film and video, they have time code. So you lay down your time code track, and then you would insert edit, and it's not going to disrupt your time code. And that's what was happening with your two recorders at home. When you're hitting record and play on one and play on the other, you're breaking that time code, and so you would get this weird jumble of, you know, the machine would freak out. And so we learned that's how you had to edit, and that was linear editing. So you have, once you start from the beginning, you can edit in the middle, but it was harder. I mean, but if you messed up, you had to actually go back to the beginning and then redo everything.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as easy as it is today on computers. But that's the first thing I learned. And then I learned, I can make one frame edits. And my classmates were like, oh, okay, what's going on here? So I would edit, say, a person running. And then every other frame, I would insert a shot of something else. And then after maybe a second of that, then it would play that other video that I was inserting in. So, okay, so we got a shot of a person running, and then I want to show a shot of a car, right? So as a transition, because you couldn't do dissolves from tape to tape, I would do this kind of quick flash edit, and that was my transition into the next video. And so, you know, shot of a person running, and I want it to transition into this car, running footage of a car, and now we're in the car footage.
Oh, I see.
And I would do that to the beat of the music, and my classmates were like, jaw dropped. They're like, dude, what, you just like sleep with that machine and figure that out?
So how long did it take you to actually, like, if you were to do an edit, let's say you got a story or a project for a school, how long would it take you to edit like a 5-minute video doing that?
It would take me about, it'd take me about a week, because we had to share. Because we had to share the equipment. So you had to sign out for so many hours. But right. I would be like that late night person that would be up at 2 a.m. using the things. So that way I had more time, and so I could probably do it in a few hours today. But back in the day, because I was still learning. Yeah. But it would take a while. Yeah. Yeah, and then. After college, and I learned how to direct and do all of that stuff too, like live broadcast, and it was stressful. I just remember seeing a classmate who, and these are college games, and they're not like the big college games. They're small college, and so the guy would be sitting outside of the van smoking a cigarette, on the break, between the breaks and stuff. I'm like, dang, that must be stressful, and it was. I remember just. Oh my gosh! Okay, standby camera 1, standby camera, take 1, and standby camera 2, and it was only 3 cameras. Yeah. And so it's not like in today's broadcast, there's more than 2 cameras.
It's like 7 cameras.
Yeah, and you're like, you got to keep track of a lot of things, and I can only imagine like the sports programs and the awards shows and things that they're all live, how stressful it is. Because eventually I worked on programs where I had to be in the truck. I didn't have to direct or do all that stuff. I did simpler things, but the video production class really led me to wanting to do that was a long answer.
That was a long answer. Yeah, that was a 15-minute answer.
That was a long answer. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But so after my college, I was asked, okay, what do you want to do now? They said, we can get you into an internship. And so that's what I did. And that's when I met these commercial producers. There were 5 of them, and they all worked by themselves on different projects. And they were writing the scripts, shooting the video, and editing the finished product. And I was like, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Damn.
And I thought, this is like making movies, but they're 30-second movies or 15-second or a minute. And that's when I fell in love with it, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do forever. And here I am, 31
30
years
later.
later.
Is it always changing, or do you feel like, is it something that's so like repetitive, or how do you, because you've done it from like the analog, is that called analog, all that
Analog,
tape
yeah.
to tape,
Yeah.
to digital?
Yeah.
How has it changed, and how do you like, how do you keep it fresh?
Oh, okay. So analog to digital, what we do today, it has changed quite a bit. So in college, I learned from VHS tape to tape, but in the broadcast industry, it was beta. So now and here's another history lesson. So back in the day, there was beta and VHS, and really what determined the tape, the format that consumers would use, was the porn industry. And so VHS won over beta because VHS was cheaper, and Sony kind of had they were like monopolizing on beta, and the technology they made, they didn't let anyone else make it. Whereas VHS, all sorts of companies can make VHS, and so that was more mass distributable. So Sony used beta, and beta was actually the more superior product out there. And I still have a Betamax, the original Betamax that my mom bought.
Damn.
And it still works. I still play Star Wars on it. It looks great. But yeah, so the professional industry, the TV industry, moved to beta, and they used that. Well, before that, they were using 3/4 inch and 1-inch tapes. So that goes way, way back. And 1-inch tape, still you had to carry around a deck on one shoulder that was about maybe 15 pounds, 15, 20 pounds. And then you'd carry it on this shoulder because you carried the camera on this shoulder. And the camera was about another 20 pounds or so. So it was a lot of weight. But so when I first started in television, they were in that transition phase of going from 3/4 inch to beta. And then of course beta was like, oh my gosh, wow, we're working with beta. Betacam is condensed because the tape is a 1/2 inch as opposed to 3/4 inch, so it's smaller, just like VHS. And then you would have the camera with the deck on the camera. Ooh, whoa, that was a breakthrough, right? You didn't have to carry a separate deck, and that's what became the norm for so many years.
Yeah.
And
So you did your commercials on Betamax?
yeah,
in the
we
beginning?
did it on Betamax. Yeah, it's not Betamax. So Betamax was what you used at home. Betacam SP is what the professional industry used.
Oh, okay.
And then it changed to DigiBeta, and it was all just different forms of beta that they had.
So how did like making commercials change for you? Was it always the same thing, like just being creative and being able to like advertise the client, or was it like, how did it change?
Well, it changed in the sense of the technology. So when I first when I started working at the television station, I after about 3 years, I kind of outgrew what I was doing there, but I had to do everything too. I was running master control and doing the news broadcast in addition to making 30-second commercials or industrial videos. So the thing that changed was the way everything was edited. So instead of doing cut edits where you're just going from one deck to another, it became digital, and that's when I was see, this is the crazy part to think about. I was in that beginning era of transitioning from analog to digital, and so Avid just came out. And so by the time I was done after 3 years at that station, I moved to a cable company on the coast, and they purchased these Avids. And so we would acquire everything on beta and then digitize it into the computer and then edit it from there. And it was kind of a cumbersome process because when you digitize something, it's real time. So you hit play, and if it's 30 minutes of footage, you got to wait 30 minutes while it imports into your computer. Now,
So did you have to be more strategic when shooting your commercials, because you knew it was going to take that long to get stuff done? And then how long was your period of like you got to deliver your commercial?
Yeah, same. Well, and that hasn't changed. It's always a short turnaround time within a week, So I would, and the crazy part was when I worked in Oregon at the cable company, I was in a satellite office, so I wasn't in the main office. The main office was an hour inland, and so I would shoot all my commercials Monday through Wednesday. And then Thursday, I would drive inland, and I would go there at 8 in the morning, and I'd be there until maybe midnight because I'm trying to edit all of my commercials for running for the following week. And this is the crazy part. So I would edit all my commercials, go back Friday and show it to all the clients. And the clients would say, oh, that's great. Oh, well, I want to change something. Oh, no. So what I'd have to do is call my colleagues in the office inland and say, hey, can you make this edit for me? And then can we meet halfway to get the new tape? Because then I would take this tape that had all the commercials on it, and I would go into this building called the Head End. I don't know why they called it that, but it's where the cable stations would put in their tapes. And there were just tapes that would loop of different commercials. And back in the day, whenever you'd watch like a cable station like ESPN or whatever, you hear this little, it sounds like a phone dialing, right? You know, the old school tone of the phone, like a push button phone. And then you would see part of a national commercial and then cut all of a sudden to a local commercial. You're like, oh, what's going on, right? That's what was happening because that little tone would trigger those machines in that little building on top of like a transmitter, if you will, and that would trigger the local commercials. And so that's what was happening. And I was like, oh, wow. It kind of opened my eyes to that whole world. And
yeah. So how many commercials were you getting a week?
Maybe like 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 2 or 3. It depends, you know. It's just like
because I mean, thinking of it like,
and I was a one-man band.
Everything that you're saying, I don't think I would have been into video production at that time because that shit seems so like cumbersome and so much work. I mean, I'm sure I probably would still be into visuals.
You probably would have. You see, here's the thing. You probably would have loved it because there's nothing else to compare it to, right? And the interesting thing is, you know, your show, Film Goals, right? The difference between film and video was so great that there were the elitists who went to film school. And when you watch movies, right? You watch movies, and this is how I know that the film people really disrespected the people in video. But the video people all aspired to be filmmakers, right? Because video was this cheaper medium. It was easy to attain. You could buy a camcorder. You couldn't. I mean, film cameras, you could. The old movie cameras, but you had to develop the film, and it was just expensive.
Yeah.
And so the film industry, whenever you see video people depicted in the film industry, like in the movie, they show like the news crews. It's always the news crew. I mean, because what else is there? So that you would see in a movie. So the TV guys would always be depicted incorrectly. So you see the camera guy, and he's holding the camera by the handle on top of the camera, and not with you put your hand through the viewfinder, right? Yeah, they're holding it this way, and it's always wrong.
Yeah,
and I think they do that on purpose. It's like, screw you, video guys.
Yeah, we need to talk to a film guy to confer the story.
Yeah, well, because you see it in like almost every movie, and then you'll see things like. In the movie, I think it was the day after tomorrow, or something like that. One of those like end of the world things. You see like the crews going out live, and back then they didn't have the digital transmission systems, so you had to have a cable that went from your camera to the truck, and you never see that because the film guys are like, that's just no one's gonna
care about that.
Except all the TV people were like, oh, that's wrong, and they would get mad. And there's even one movie when the camera guy was holding the camera on his left shoulder. There's no left shoulder cameras, and the film crew, they took the viewfinder and flipped it over so it was upside down, and so you could see, I think, Sony upside down, so they could just position it better, so they could see the actor's face for that particular shot. And I'm like, it's
funny the things that you like, the details that we see.
Yeah,
like the details in films. It's like that's not accurate. But I'm sure they do that. Like with movies, you do that for a lot of different like things.
Yeah, well, because sometimes those people just don't do their research. Yeah. But I think that the film people did those things on purpose just to really piss off the video people, because they know that video people want to be filmmakers. And that's what it was. For me, I wanted to work in film. And so the change in technology really brought the difference between film and video closer, because now everything's digital. So there's no film. I mean, there's still film out there.
You can still shoot on film, but it's
But yeah, and there was a period when I was working in video, and somebody said, "Oh, well, when there were companies out there that actually took your video, your 30 frames per second video, and they would do what they called film look it." I don't even know what they did. They processed it somehow. They kind of made it, to me, it looked blurry. It looked like it was out of focus, but I think they added some sort of thing to give it motion blur that video didn't have. Video was very crisp and clean because of the 30 frames per second. And then they would spit that video out at 24 frames per second, and it would give it this little stutter, if you will, for lack of a better word, and that's what gave it that film look. And then, of course, everything became digital. You can shoot. Oh, and they had a camera. The camera XL1, the Canon XL1 was that first camera that could shoot in 24p, and all the video guys were like, "Oh my gosh, now we can shoot film-like stuff on a video camera."
Yeah.
And so everyone gravitated toward those cameras, and then more and more the consumer cameras gave you that option to shoot in different frame rates. And so that the difference between film and video, that those lines became blurred, and all the film people were like, "Oh."
And now it's even worse.
Yeah.
Because now it's like you can go 60 frames. And then now it's that difference between like film, video, and social media video, and like vertical video.
Oh, gosh.
And now there's that whole battle between like, why are people shooting vertical video? And sometimes I get annoyed, but I see it. Like, I get it. You know, everything's being played on social media. But now, like, everyone's rigging their cameras to be vertical, which is, All right. So let's talk more about your commercial stuff. Do you have like a favorite commercial you ever made? Or like your top like 5 favorite commercials?
Top 5 favorite commercials. It's well, definitely nothing that I made in the past prior to my like last 10 years. But commercials that I really enjoyed were ones that the client really let me do whatever I wanted. So I think one of the most memorable ones was one that you helped me work on, which was the Johnny Legends Mitsubishi commercial. Which
you said not the last 10 years?
What's
that?
that?
Was like this year.
Oh, I know. No, but I mean anything prior to the last 10 years, like in my college days.
Like early years?
Yeah, early years. None of those things really stuck out as great commercials. And some of them I was like, oh, it's very bad. So I'm glad that technology isn't available to show those old videos.
They're somewhere out there.
No, they're not. They don't live on the internet. So they're on tape somewhere, but those tapes probably can't be played because they're on old tapes. But yeah, favorite commercials is Johnny Legend Mitsubishi when we were allowed to kind of pay homage to a Mitsubishi commercial from 2006 where they used Taiko drums to advertise the Mitsubishi Eclipse. And fast forward to today, the client was like, well, I need something new for my commercials. They had been using Francis Ngannou, the UFC champion, heavyweight champion, and now he's a boxer. But and we used comedy there, and those were my favorite commercials too because they were very funny, and Francis was awesome to work with. But the Taiko one really because, again, it was a callback to the 2006 commercial, and it was my drum group. One of the drummers wrote the song that's in the commercial, so it's his song. It's not something that you're going to find across the nation. It's not something you're going to find on a stock music library. It's an original song, and so that tied with something that I love outside of television, the Japanese drumming, and kind of doing that kind of throwback to
like an homage to that commercial.
That was my favorite, and it was awesome.
I was helping in it, so that's probably why.
And that's why because Angel,
because that's why he's saying it.
No, but it was a fun shoot too, and it just having that ability to be creative like that. That's the best. You don't always get that in commercials. Most of the time, it's the client wants a specific thing. This one, the client had no idea, and I said, let's do this, and that's what makes it fun.
Does it get repetitive for you? Because a lot of these, especially here in Vegas, there's a lot of lawyers a lot of like I guess.
Heating and cooling places.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it can get repetitive in that sense because we have like so many, and I was telling a client, a heating and cooling client, that I've probably done a majority of the heating and cooling places that you see on air. There's a few that I have not done, but I would say all of the smaller, not the big corporate names, I've done all of the like local ones, and I said that's a good thing and a bad thing, I guess, because, well, one guy is making all of the commercials for the competitors, but I know exactly what everyone else is doing, so I can write commercials that don't say the same thing that the other ones are doing, and I know, okay, this is their hook. They have a dog, so that's their hook. These guys have a spokesperson, that's their hook, and I can write, customize it to each client, and they're going to be different.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So being repetitive, yes, but that's where the creativity comes in.
So you mentioned taiko drumming.
Uh-huh.
That's another one of your passions, and you own a taiko group here in town. So talk a little bit about how you got into it.
So taiko, for those of you who don't know, is the Japanese word for drum, and so they're Japanese drums. They're big, giant drums, wine barrel size, and bigger and smaller too. So how I got into that was actually because of that Mitsubishi commercial from 2006.
It's all connected.
It's all connected, right? So I was working at a different TV station here in town, and my boss wanted to use taiko drums to advertise the investigative team of the station. And he said, and this is the funny part because I played the race card because I'm Japanese, third generation, born in Los Angeles. So I've never been to Japan. So if anyone wants to sponsor me, please.
It's time for you to go.
Yeah, there you go. There's one of those links to donate. So
go fund me. Let's get Gene to Japan.
Go fund me. So he wanted to kind of mimic that national commercial, and that was a national commercial. So he said, "Have you seen that?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, do you know any taiko groups in town that could possibly be?" And I didn't have my group at the time, so I said to him, because he's Caucasian, and I said, "Well, why would I know if there's a taiko group in town?"
Hey, Gene, you're Japanese, right?
Yeah, that's what it was like. I was like, "Why would I know?" And he was like, and if anyone could get whiter, he did. And he was like, "Oh, I didn't mean that at all." He could, HR was just like screaming in his ear. And I'm like, "No, I'm kidding. I know of a group, and I'd heard about this group in town that started in 1993. And we met up with them at their school, and I got it. First thing, I wasn't even the person shooting the commercial. I was just consulting because I had a crew that was going to shoot it that I worked with, and so I went there, and the first thing I guess I did, I went to their big drum, which is called an odaiko. It's about 3 feet in diameter and probably about maybe 2.5 to 3 feet long. It's a huge drum. And I was looking at it for camera angles, and so I got kind of into this stance, and I was looking at the drum, thinking, "Oh, the camera would be cool right here, or this angle." And the instructor saw me do that, and he made mental note of it. So then when we shot the commercial, we had them all on green screen or blue screen, and made 7 drummers look like 30.
Oh,
and my boss, all the credit to him, he has since passed, but he was an older guy who had worked in the TV industry, Food Network, and things like that. And he was the kind of manager who had something specific on his mind, and he would do it himself. So we had our crew shoot it, and then he edited it, and he did all the compositing and everything, added like torches and everything with flames, and it was amazing. And so that's what got me into the drums, because the drummers gravitated toward me during the shoot. And they said, "Hey,"
because you were Japanese.
Yes. And I did that to them too. They were like, "Hey, do you want to learn how to play these drums?" I was like, "Because I'm Japanese." And they were like, "Uh-huh." I'm like,
"You should know how to play drums. You're Japanese."
Right. And then come to find out, not all of them were Japanese.
Yeah.
And but I fell in love with the art because now here's where it ties back to the whole scheme of things. So being born in California, Los Angeles specifically, at the City of Angels Hospital, and when I was 3,
TMI.
because we talk about film and the film industry being in California. So I moved from Los Angeles to Oregon when I was 3, not by choice, but because my parents moved there. And I grew up in a very small cowboy town where there were no Japanese people. We were the Japanese people. And then eventually, well, there was a Chinese family that lived there too, and eventually another Japanese family. So there were 3 Asian families officially that lived in my hometown in Oregon. And I was far removed from my culture because I wanted to be like everyone else. It was a cowboy town. I didn't want to be a cowboy, but I didn't want to be Japanese either. But then by the time I was a teenager, I got into martial arts and started to embrace my heritage a little bit, even though I was studying a Korean martial art and not a Japanese martial art. But once I got into television and met that Taiko group back in 2006, that really opened the door to really embracing my culture. Because then, as a result of that commercial and playing in that group for a little while, I started my own group in 2010, and we're an LLC, and so we get hired for corporate gigs, for casinos and such.
Yeah.
And
you just did the festival, the Japanese festival.
yeah, the
like
Japanese
a couple weeks
festival.
ago.
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like
A
that.
few weeks ago, we did the Japanese festival in Henderson. We do 2 each year, one in the spring, one in the fall. But they're not really related, but they are, and they're related in culture. But different groups put these festivals on, and I'm also the MC, and so it really brought me closer to this culture, the heritage that I was removed from as a child growing up, and that I kind of pushed away for so long, and now I'm kind of part of it. And Japanese people, I know just enough Japanese to get me in trouble because I can say my name. That's easy because it's still Gene. There's no difference, but I can introduce myself. All the words.
Is
that lead-
Sugano Japanese?
Yeah, Sugano is Japanese. Yeah.
How do you say it?
Sugano?
Okay. Sugano.
Yeah. If you want to, Sugano.
Sugano.
Yeah,
That's how you say it.
The
That's
guy,
good.
the guttural, Toshido Mufune sort of way. But
No,
yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, you're around town, always like playing and stuff, which is cool. Before we end it though, I do want to learn. I don't want people to learn how the drum is made because you were talking about how it was made the other day because you brought the drum into work.
Oh, okay.
Just real quick, like how
So-
you make those big ass drums.
So the drums traditionally are made by carving out a tree, and then you hollow it out, and then you use that little core, you hollow that out, and you make smaller drums as you go. But that's not how we made ours. Ours were made from wine barrels because, well, we don't have the luxury of being able to cut down a tree, and so we're
And
kind of,
where was it made? Yours?
the ones that we have, those were made locally. So
Oh, okay.
excuse me. So the barrels themselves are wine barrels. They were wine barrels, and then we recycled them in a sense. So we bought these wine barrels from a guy who supplied them for Taiko groups specifically because a wine barrel has a hole in it where the wine comes out. Well, he would eliminate that. They're called staves, individual slats of wood that are cut in such a way to create the circle. And so he would remove that one, put a different one in, so it'd still make the circle, but you wouldn't have that hole. And then all you had to do was cut the ends where the lids would go, and then you could make a drum. So you have to. This could get really long. Anyway, you take the wine barrel, take it apart, glue it back together, and then you have to get these leather skins
Yeah.
that you soak for 3 days, and then you.
Well,
put
you
it
gotta
on
tell
top.
people what those skins are.
Oh, it's cowhide.
Yeah.
or bull
That's what I
hide.
was like. What? I didn't know that
Yeah.
because I didn't know that. It's made out
Yeah.
of cows.
Yeah, so that's another old term. When you hear a drummer says, "I'm gonna hit the skins," well, because back in the day, the drum heads were made out of skin, animal skin, and I know a lot of
Are these not?
these are. So
Okay, yeah.
but like drum sets now. Drum sets now are
Oh,
synthetic.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
But they used to be.
But the taiko drums are still made out of cow skin.
Yeah, still made it. And funny enough, there's the PETA and all of those animal rights groups don't say anything because it's more of a cultural instrument. It's not like, we go out and kill animals to make a drum. It's the leather is a result, and we can get into the whole thing.
into the whole thing.
but no, we've been fortunate. We've had people who are animal lovers who have played the drums, and there's others around the country that appreciate the art form, and they know that, we're very respectful for the drums. It's not something that, we're like, yeah, animal skin. No, it's not like that at
No,
all.
I just thought it was interesting that it was made out of cow skin, and
Yeah.
the way it's made, like it's soaked and then it gets hard, and
Yeah, it
they
gets
gotta
really hard.
soften it and shit like that.
Yeah, so you just have to soak it to stretch the skin initially, and then you don't soak it at all. It stays dry. It should.
Yeah.
Eventually, it wears over time, just like anything. You're hitting it with a stick, and it's gonna get worn where you're hitting it, and then eventually it'll break, and you have to take all that stuff off and reskin it.
All right. Well, that's Gene Sugano. Thank you for being on the podcast. I hope you guys learned a history lesson on video production and taiko drumming.
You know what you could do is play it at double speed, so that way they can get all that information. You don't have to edit so much out.
No, it's all right. All right, guys. See you next time. Peace.